Hello. How is everyone doing? um, okay, I can definitely tell we're live because I can hear myself on YouTube, which is why I need to mute it. Welcome to the one of the first panels of the UK Asexuality Conference. Today we're going to be covering the basics of asexuality in this Asexuality 101 panel. We have got a lot of time though, so we can probably get into some more interesting stuff at the end of the session. So just to introduce me and my co-host to start. My name is Daniel. I identify as homoromantic asexual and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, my name is Priya. I use she, her pronouns and I identify as asexual and demiromantic.
Hey, I'm Krista. You would have just seen me in the introduction if you tuned in for that, but I identify as asexual and gray romantic, and I use she, they pronouns.
Excellent. So the way this is going to work out is that, as you can probably see on screen at the moment, we've made some slides to go through and kind of cover all the basics of the ACE spectrum and all fun things around that. And after that, we will be taking questions from you, the audience. So there is a Slido link in the description of this video, and you can hop over there, post questions, vote on questions, and they will be fed through to us to answer once we've gotten around to the end. But we will announce when we start answering questions. So without further ado, let's get started. This is going to start really basic. But we're going to start with what is asexuality. Asexuality is generally defined as feeling little to no sexual attraction towards people of any gender. Whereas sexual attraction in particular is a term that, well, a lot of people do understand, but don't think about it enough to put a definition onto it, is the desire to have sex with another person or gender. Obviously, this definition I'm using right now is not necessarily going to encompass all experiences. It's just a good starting point to understand, and it's a definition that's analogous to those of other orientations that you may be more familiar with. Another thing is that you may have heard before during this or while I'm talking right now, using the contraction ACE. ACE is generally used as just a shortened version of asexual, in the same way that gay is a shortened version of homosexual. But also it can encompass other orientations on the ACE spectrum as well. So a lot of people, when they first hear about asexuality, will confuse it with other things. So a big one is celibacy. Celibacy is the choice to abstain from sex. This is very different from asexuality because it doesn't really consider sexual attraction when you're talking about that. A celibate person may feel sexual attraction, they're just not choosing to act upon that sexual attraction. Someone can be asexual and celibate, or asexual and non-celibate, or not asexual and celibate. Any combination, because celibacy is simply a choice that the individual is making not to have sex. In addition, it is also different from any medical conditions that may arise. Asexuality, as other orientations are, is an inherent part of you. So a lot of people will think, oh, you can fix that by going to the hospital and getting these drugs done. But quite often what they're thinking of is medical conditions that may lower your libido. As we'll mention a bit later on, libido and sexual attraction are different. So when someone tells you that they're asexual, it's important not to try and dismiss their orientation as something that's medically wrong with them. So those were things that asexual isn't, but there are also things that asexual can be. including asexuals can date. This isn't true for all ace people, but as we'll talk about later, attraction comes in many different forms, and some people may be asexual but still want to be in a relationship. That can be a romantic relationship or a platonic one. Asexual people can have a libido. So the way I like to think of it is libido is kind of the strength of your sex drive, and attraction is who that sex drive is directed towards. So asexuality is the lack of direction, I suppose. An asexual person just doesn't feel sexual attraction towards anyone, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a sex drive. And because they may have a sex drive, they may choose to satisfy that sex drive by masturbating, by watching porn. It just won't necessarily involve other people. However, now that I've said that, some asexual people, despite not feeling sexual attraction, will choose to have sex. There can be many different reasons for this, so I'm not going to go into all of them right now. But it could be, for example, if they have a partner who isn't asexual, who they want to have sex with as a bonding experience, or they could just find it enjoyable. Cool. So I hope that all makes sense so far. You may have heard me mention earlier in this the ace spectrum. So asexuality, as the singular definition, is not feeling sexual attraction towards people of any gender. But there are experiences between asexual and allosexual, where allosexual is your typical sexualities. So homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, straight, those sorts of things. But there's a range of experiences in between typical levels of sexual attraction and not feeling any at all. And that is what we call the ace spectrum. Two main examples we use when talking about the ace spectrum are gray asexual. Gray asexual is a bit tricky to define because it's kind of spans the whole spectrum from asexual to allosexual, but it's generally defined as feeling less sexual attraction than is typical, or feeling it under certain circumstances, or very rarely. The other one that's often used as a common example of the ace spectrum is demisexual. Demisexuals will only feel sexual attraction once a strong emotional bond is formed. So it may be they have a lifelong friend, or they're in a romantic relationship for a long time, and only then they can feel sexual attraction. Of course, that list was not extensive. It would be a very short list if it was only 2 items. There are many ace microlabels of varying specificities. So it's not something that we're going to cover here, because then we'll probably be here for about 3 hours. The important thing to remember about the ace spectrum is that there's kind of a couple of different types of orientation, not necessarily classified in that way, but I like to think of it as 2 different types that you can kind of mix and match. So some orientations describe whom you're attracted to. So this will be things like asexual, gay, bi. So an asexual person, not attracted to people. A gay person is attracted to someone of the same gender. Bi person of multiple genders. But that's not really describing how they're feeling the sexual attraction. So there are other orientations in the ace spectrum, like demisexual and gray asexual, as I just mentioned, which may give more information about how you're feeling that attraction. So naturally, you can mix and match those 2 together to kind of get a more specific orientation. For example, pandemisexual. What does this mean? It means that someone who is pandemisexual will only feel sexual attraction to people they have a strong emotional bond with, but when they do feel that sexual attraction, it can be to people regardless of their gender. Another example is straight gray asexual, who they would feel less or less frequent sexual attraction than is typical. But when they do feel that sexual attraction, it's only going to be towards people of the opposite gender. And the other thing that's important in this is other forms of attraction. So I'm sure you've had enough of my dulcet British tones by now. So we're going to go over the pond and pass over to Krista to talk about the split attraction model.
Yeah, so now you get to hear my shrill American voice, I guess. All right, so just going to remind you all that if you have any questions about the slides or anything else, you could always go to Slido. There's a link in the description and you can submit your questions there. We aren't going to be taking questions from the YouTube chat, so make sure if you have questions, you're posting them there. All right, so the split attraction model, you will sometimes see this shortened as SAM as well, but that's what it stands for. And it's basically the idea that there are a lot of different types of attraction that someone can experience. So the big ones are sexual attraction. So this is the desire to have sex with someone very broadly. There's also romantic attraction, which is the desire to date and be in a romantic relationship with someone. Then there's also sensual attraction. This is the desire to be in close physical contact with someone, like cuddling and hugging and holding hands and things like that. And there's aesthetic attraction, which is just the idea that you think somebody looks really pretty. And so on and so forth. There's a lot of different forms of attraction out there. Next slide, please. Yeah, so along with the split attraction model is the idea that you can, wait, before I get into that. So when you have different sexual orientations, such as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, what's usually assumed along with that is that you have the same romantic orientation. So if you are heterosexual, it's often assumed you are also heteroromantic. If you're homosexual, it is assumed you are homoromantic, and so on and so forth. But then, next slide. With the split attraction model, though, you can kind of mix and match your different labels. So you can be both homosexual and biromantic, or pansexual and aromantic, or any different combination thereof. And some people like to shorten this to gay ace if you're homosexual, or homoromantic, straight ace, etc., and so on and so forth. So like personally, I identify as bi ace when I'm putting a term to who I experience attraction towards, or you'll also see people say that they are allo-aro, which means that they are allosexual, so they could be bi, pan, hetero, homo, and they're aromantic as well. So that's how people want to communicate their labels in different ways. So next slide. But importantly is that it's all subjective. So you'll see a lot of people asking like, well, how do I know I'm experiencing sexual attraction? How do I know I'm experiencing romantic attraction? But the reality is that this can differ from person to person, and what can be sexual to someone can be romantic or platonic to someone else. And you really can't make big generalizations about any one person or any one relationship even, because all these different relationship wants and needs are going to differ from person to person. A lot of advice that I give, oh, sorry, can you go back one? A lot of advice that I give to people who are trying to figure this out is kind of think about yourself and what you are comfortable with and what you personally consider to be romantic or sexual, and then what you would want to do with another person and what you are looking for in a relationship. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so then there are a lot of different relationships that aces can be in. So there's ace-ace relationships, which honestly just look the same as any other relationship. A lot of times, though, it doesn't involve sex since the sexual attraction isn't there, although it can involve sex if that is something you want. There's also ace-allo relationships, so an asexual individual in a relationship with an allosexual person or someone who experiences sexual attraction. People tend to frame this a lot as a compromise. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's still not that different from normal relationships. You're still figuring out if you want to have sex, when you want to have sex, how you want to have sex, if that's something you want or if that's something that you don't want. There's also non-traditional relationships. So this can include platonic relationships, often referred to as queer platonic relationships or QPRs. This is the same as a romantic relationship in the sense that it is still a lifelong, significant relationship that a person wants in their life, but the people in the relationship define it as platonic. It can still involve romance coded things. So you could be in a platonic relationship and hold hands and kiss and things like that. But importantly, the people in it don't consider that to be romantic. They consider that to be platonic. Another form of non-traditional relationships can be polygamy or having relationships with multiple people. And for a lot of aces, that's something that they really like. And they like being able to be in polyamorous relationships and getting different needs from different people. But importantly, every healthy relationship, every relationship structure I've gone over here involves communication about boundaries and allows for these boundaries to change and grow over the course of the relationship. All right, I think that's it for me, and I'm going to toss it over to Priya now.
Hi. So, an important thing to know about asexuality is that feelings, not actions. I've also commonly heard the phrase attraction does not equal action, and action does not equal attraction. So aces might choose to still have sex. It may be for a variety of reasons. It may be to have a biological child. It may be to please a partner, or it may be for some other personal reason. Really, what's important is that they are doing it out of their own free will. And arousal is separate from sexual attraction. So arousal is simply a biological process that happens in the human body due to some sort of external stimuli. It does not determine what your sexual orientation is, and it doesn't mean that you want to engage in any sort of sexual activity. So, how do you know if you're ace? Well, asexuality is your asexuality is determined by yourself. You are ultimately the person who gets to decide if that label is right for you. If you're starting off on your journey of asking yourself, is this label right for me? Here are some common ace experiences that many asexuals discuss having as the moment that they realized that they were asexual. So one common experience is not experiencing crushes to the same degree or at all compared to your peers. So by same degree, this kind of goes back to the split attraction model, where if some of your peers are having crushes, but you notice that there's an aspect of your personal crush that's missing, like maybe you don't experience sexual attraction, like maybe you need to know someone before you can feel attraction at all. A common ace experience I hear is a lot of aces don't experience celebrity crushes, which could be an indication of either asexuality and or demisexuality. It really just depends on the person. Another common ace experience is drawing a blank when deciding what your type is for an intimate relationship. So this could be an intimate relationship, again, either in a sexual context or a romantic context. And it really just depends on your own personal view of what you believe an intimate relationship is and isn't. And The last point I want to go over is sexual attraction is viewed as being fake or formulaic. So, it's a bit of a common experience for asexuals to communicate that when they first were realizing that they were ace, they might have said, "Oh, I thought no one felt like sexual attraction at all," and that everyone was just saying it as sort of a bit of a performance or something like that. Or it could be seen as formulaic, so it could be seen as if a person is X, Y, or Z, then they are attractive. Or it could be, or sexual attraction could just go over your head. And while there are many other asexual experiences, these are just a few common ones to ask yourself if you're experiencing these. So what are the statistics of the ace population? The population statistics of self-identified asexuals has varied throughout recent years. According to the Williams Institute, a recent study has estimated that 1.7% of adults identify as asexual. That is a world population percentage. According to GLAAD from 2017, adults ages 18 to 24 self-identify as asexual, up to 4%. So we'd definitely see a higher percentage among younger adults in this more modern era. What this means, I'll leave to be determined to the experts. Next. Aphobia. So it exists. A lot of people might say that it doesn't exist because how can someone be against the lack of attraction? Simply, surprisingly, there are a lot of people who are. It's the bias against asexual and or aromantic people. This can also manifest in a variety of ways. So thinking asexuals need to be fixed, either medically or socially or personally, that they need to find the one, because often the one is finding the one who you're meant to be with for the rest of your life is a bit of a cultural goal in many places, and that aces aren't queer. There has been a huge debate over the years about whether the A in LGBTQIA plus stands for asexual or ally. And well, you might get a different answer depending on who you ask still. Generally over the years as asexuality has become more recognized both in the LGBT plus community and in general mainstream media and culture, more people are recognizing that asexuality is a queer identity. And aphobia can differ based on other identities such as race or gender. So there's an overlap between aphobia and then issues of racism or sexism that can add up over time. Amnormativity. that is an interesting word that I should define first. So, the way I like to think about it is ammonormativity is from the root amor, which means love, and then there's the suffix, which is normativity, which is just to believe that something is normal. So it's this cultural belief that being in love, whether it's through a sexual or romantic relationship, is viewed as quote unquote normal, similar to how heteronormativity is the belief that a heterosexual relationship is viewed as normal. So this, in essence, it's the pressure to be in a relationship from culture, society, or your peers. This can manifest in another number of ways. It could be married individuals getting tax benefits. It could be only hearing narratives that end in love and our marriage. In media, it can be feeling sorry for single individuals, and it could be having a harder time finding a place to rent if you aren't in a relationship. So ammonormativity affects not only individuals on a social level or on a media level, it also affects individuals on a systematic level as well. So it's definitely very pervasive. It's very, very common in our society.
So thank you, Priya and Krista. And wait, I can't thank myself. That's really weird. I just got confused. So that's hopefully covering the basics of asexuality. We did touch on some topics that will be discussed in other panels and Discord discussions. So definitely look at the program if you're interested in things like Priya mentioning how race can affect aphobia. We have panels on Jewish aces, Black British aces. You'll be able to watch the recording of once this is done, and also a British aces of Asian heritage. If you want to learn more about the ace spectrum, there's a Discord discussion as well. And I'm sure there are more things that I'm forgetting about. So if there's something there that interests you that we've kind of mentioned briefly here, then you can always check out the program and see what interests you. But
yeah, we do have, if you come to the anti-racism workshop, that's a couple hours after this today, I will be there as well, and we can talk about all things anti-racism there.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up as well. I didn't have the schedule in front of me. I was like, which ones did we kind of mention? But yeah, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this little presentation. Now we're going to open up the floor to questions. I think we've already had a few come in. So if those could be popped on screen whenever they're ready. So the first question we have are, how do normative life goals differ for aces? For example, casual and long-term relationships, marriage, parenting and adoption, home ownership, work, vacations, and volunteering. Krista or Priya, do you have any thoughts on this to begin with?
I can start, I guess. I think in one sense, it's not that different. So you get a lot of aces who are interested in long-term relationships, in marriage, in having kids, and home ownership, and things like that. You also can get aces, and it's often like, particularly within the ace community, you'll get more people who aren't interested in marriage and in having kids and things like that. Speaking of, we're also having a child-free aces session tomorrow if you want to talk more about that. And I don't know the statistics with a lot of these things because there hasn't been a ton of research done on particular statistics, like how many aces like volunteer, how they feel about work and things like that. But yeah, it's sort of, in one sense, it's not that different, but in another sense, it is often seen as a specific issue if people are often assuming that you're very interested in marriage, kids, long-term relationships, because there are aces who also don't have any interest in those things.
Yeah, that's good points. Priya, do you have anything to add to this question?
I do agree that I believe it depends on just the individual. However, I can see why all these like different aspects of life are kind of bundled together, because being in a long-term relationship, marriage, parenting, adoption, home ownership, work, vacations, volunteering, the way that most societies are structured is if you're in a married relationship, or if you're parenting or adopting, usually that goes into what kind of tax breaks you can get, how you can own a home, and that ties into your work and your vacations, and then that ties into your free time, which would also tie into when you can volunteer. So it definitely varies from like person to person, but I can see how because a lot of aces may have either a different viewpoint or a different thought process into going into a long-term relationship, how that can eventually affect all these other factors. So it's definitely, I do think, because asexuals aren't necessarily in the society isn't necessarily built for asexuals, it's definitely these factors in life are definitely things we have to think about a bit more and see where we fit.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good point, and I think, like you both were saying, it's a very individual experience, a very personal question to answer, especially since the spectrum varies so much. People who are romantic, alloromantic aces may, for example, be more interested in more amatonormative things, but not necessarily. It really depends. I think the key point is that the way that society is structured, it doesn't it gives benefits for those who do follow that amatonormative structure. So for people who don't, people who want QPRs, or people who are happy being single, or people who don't have children, they can miss out on those benefits that they would otherwise get if they did follow the strict structure that society deems for us. But yeah, I hope that was a good answer to that question. Do we have any others we could be answering? That looks like another question, or I just blinked and missed something. How could we counter general public misunderstanding of aces as a group that is monolithic, for example, all non-libidoist, aromantic, cis, not enjoying sex, and non-partnered? So to break that down a bit, in case because there's a lot of big words in that, which I know that may not be as well known for some people, especially if we do have listeners from non-English speaking countries. What that's going on about is that there is the assumption that asexuals are all people who don't want relationships, or all people who never have sex or masturbate under any circumstances, and things like that. Those are like the base assumptions that people might think about asexual people when they hear about it for the first time. So the question is, how do we counter that misunderstanding as asexuality as a group?
My first thought is simply just more media representation from other asexual people. or other people in the ace community.
Yeah, absolutely.
My inclination here is to caution against swinging very hard one way or the other, because I know typically the view of aces, like stereotypically, is this, that we're non-libidoist, aromantic, cis, not enjoying sex, and non-partnered. But I also think there's been a lot of conversations in the ace community recently about not swinging too hard in the other direction and insisting that, oh, hey, aces can have sex, same as anybody else. Even though that's true, I think it is important to remember that a lot of aces still don't like sex, and that still exists, and it's okay. And that can often get overlooked if we're not trying to show the whole spectrum of ace identities.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a similar thing. I hope that we managed to make the balance quite well when we were doing the presentation, but it's very easy to, when you hear this misconception, which is a misconception that all asexual people don't fit into this one category, there is a natural instinct to be like, no, we're not all like that. But when you say that, it can be damaging to people who do have that experience. So it's important to say, no, that's a misconception. A lot of aces have this experience, but there are aces who don't have this experience as well. So you just have to make sure that you're giving equal representation to all sides of the spectrum when you talk about it. And I think that's something that, as Priya was saying, where representation, we need more representation in that regard, because if you have, say, like 2 or 3 aces talking about asexuality, or 2 or 3 aces on TV, then you're only going to get a very small sliver of the experiences of the ace community within that representation. So by increasing representation, we're therefore naturally getting a broader subset of the community having their voices heard. Perfect. Is there anything else to add on that question, or should we go on to the next one? How do you recognize non-romantic attraction? That text looks massive after the last 2 questions. Any thoughts on this one to begin with?
I have a lot of thoughts. All right, listen. So I'm gray romantic, but here's the thing. I think a lot of romantic attraction is like made up by the allos who just want us to spend more on Valentine's Day cards. Because really all romantic attraction is that you are making a conscious decision to be in a romantic relationship with someone, and that's something that you want out of your relationship. And it's a conscious choice, really, in my mind, because I don't think that there's a certain way you have to feel about someone in order to be in a romantic relationship with them. Like, you cannot feel inherently like you want a romantic relationship, and you can still go have that with someone. There's nothing stopping you. And it's just that you want to label your relationship as romantic. That's what makes it romantic, and that's your decision to make. There's nothing inherent about you that can stop you or allow you to do this. So that is my conspiracy theory rant about romantic attraction.
Yeah, and I think there are people in the YouTube comments who agree with you. Artemis Phoenix saying, "Yes, Krista tell the truth. This take makes so much sense." And I do agree. Like, the romance is kind of a social construct. In a sense, where you're probably feeling like biologically the same feelings that you would do towards like a really close friend or a family member. There's just this social box where it's like, okay, this one specific relationship you have, maybe you do these specific things with them, or you spend your life with them, live with them, like cohabitate. Therefore, that is romantic, and that it kind of unlocks that version of it. There's not really any difference between that and a really strong platonic bond. And that's, I guess, why queer platonic relationships are becoming more popular, because people are like, well, I want to have this committed relationship, but I don't want it to be narrowly constrained in this box of romance that society has decided for me and my relationship. I will say, as a particularly alloromantic ace myself, I'm quite comfortable in romance, I suppose, which is a weird sentence, and I don't really know how else to express it other than that. But I kind of like the idea of having that one committed relationship that's kind of typical to the culture that I grew up in, which is totally fine too. My personal experience of romantic attraction is just it's very strongly linked to sensual and like I guess intellectual attraction. So like getting to know someone and like having physical contact, like hugging them, tends to like increase that sense of romantic attraction, I suppose. So it's worth keeping in mind like the whole spectrum of attraction when you think about, is this romantic attraction? Well, try and break it down. What am I feeling? What do I want to do? And then would I classify that as romantic attraction? Cool. Do you have any points to add on this, Priya? Because I think Krista's rant was before you answered.
Honestly, what you two were talking about how like romantic attraction is a bit of a social contract really spoke to me, because I feel like in my experience as someone who's demi-romantic is that what usually happens is that it's not exactly like an attraction, it's more like getting close with someone and then mentally thinking, oh well, in the future I might want to have X, Y, or Z plans with them, and there is a very like narrow definition of like what romantic attraction is. So if you want to spend like, if you want to go on a date, if you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, if you want to be in close proximity and kind of be a partner, that's all usually seen as like romantic partnership. So I usually view that as a romantic attraction, and I am very like comfortable in romantic attraction. It has to be tied with platonic attraction, and I have heard a lot of people within the ace community ask, well, how do you tell the difference between platonic attraction and romantic attraction? And I always think, well, up to you, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement in that sentiment that romance is what you make of it. So yes, that was a thorough answer to a short question. So do we have anything else lined up?
Can I jump in
Oh,
quickly
yeah, sure.
first? All right, so we only have about 4 minutes left. I just want to give a shout out to what's happening next. So there's going to be another YouTube panel about autistic aces that looks like it'll be a lot of fun. And then over on Discord, we're doing the first Discord workshop, and this is going to be on writing ace characters, which looks really interesting. Like, I'm not a writer, and I'm thinking about attending it. I also want to point out on the Slido, we did get a comment that polygamy should be polyamory in the presentation, as they are not the same. Thank you. That's a really good catch.
Yes, I should have mentioned. I saw that as well. To be honest, a lot of these slides came from a presentation I gave 2 years ago. So it was I've learned a lot since then, and definitely polyamory is the word that I meant to use when talking about that. But yes, thank you for catching me, Krista, as well with the time. I was looking at it, but I forgot we have a 10-minute break and it ends at 20 past and not half past. But so I hope you're looking forward to those panels. We may have time for another question before we go, though. How best to come out to someone who knows nothing about asexuality yet. That is a fragment, not a sentence. But I will answer it as if it is anyway. Yeah, does anyone have any points on that to begin with?
All I want to say is know your audience, even if someone doesn't know anything about asexuality. It's always important to know how they feel about other members of the LGBT plus community, who they are to you. Are they a family member, a friend, a peer? And to also know if they would have any personal beliefs that may tie to, if they may be tied to any groups that may have used asexuality. So they may know nothing about asexuality, but if they have a bunch of friends who do and they're not too positive about it, maybe it's like take some caution. Or on the flip side, if they don't know anything about asexuality, but they have a lot of friends that are very supportive of it, then it's like, okay, it's probably a good idea to come out. So definitely just know your audience and know your context, and safety is always your number one priority.
Yeah. Do you have anything on that same point, Krista?
Yeah, coming out is just, it's so complicated because there's so many different situations you could end up in. So I would primarily just second what Priya said about knowing your audience. Like if you know this person would look at resources, you could come prepared with like the AVEN FAQ, other links and guides to what asexuality is. I tend to, like when I was first coming out, I just was prepared with like a quick definition of what it is because I didn't want to get into a whole explanation while also going through this very like emotionally draining process and things like that. But definitely if you could like test the waters a bit, don't do anything that's going to put you in danger. Like your safety comes first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think definitely try and work out if you're in a safe position to come out. Make sure you know generally who you're coming out to and how get a sense of how you think they'll react. But my general tactic is to do something short and just like a quick definition, and then point them towards some resources to learn more about it. So yeah, I think we are just about rounding out on time. I will need to head off to one of the other panels to help out. So I just once again give a huge thank you to Priya and Krista, and then Ed in the background who has been working on our moderating side, popping up all the questions when we need them. Once again,
captioner as well. We've
yes.
had live captions for this whole thing.
My Clear Text. I was trying to remember the name of it. So thank you to all the people in My Clear Text. It really is appreciated for making this conference as accessible as possible. So yeah, you can continue this discussion as well on the Discord. There will be a Discord text channel for Asexuality 101. And we are now good to end the stream. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of the conference.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, I think that went well. I need to head off to Autistic Cases.